The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
There's a beautiful story that I read recently. There was a bar mitzvah bacher. His name was Meir Simcha Breuer. His father was a chashuva rav in Flatbush. I believe now he's no longer, he's in Eretz Yisrael today. Reb Breuer, Pinchas Breuer, was a very big Talmid Chacham, and he was a wonderful speaker and a very big kayach in the Rabbanis. Anyway, he had a bar mitzvah boy for a son. His name was Meir Simcha. And this Meir Simcha Breuer was riding his bike to yeshiva. He had a basket on the back of his bike. And he came to yeshiva one morning for davening, and he was about to unload from the basket on the back of his bike his tefillin. He just got a brand new fresh pair of tefillin for his bar mitzvah. And lo and behold, they were not in the basket. They must have jumped out of the basket. He must have hit a curb or, done some shtick, and it fell out and it went flying and it wasn't there anymore. And he went nuts, as you can imagine. It's one thing if you lose your tefillin when you're 80 years old, still not geschmack. But when you lose it like a couple of months after your bar mitzvah, then it's mamish, so precious to a young boy, and you lose it. And what are my parents going to say? He was so scared and so upset with himself. And he went and he tried to retrace his bicycle route, and he went all over, and he asked his friends to help him look, and into stores he went, trying desperately to find the tefillin, and he couldn't find them. And finally, he had to face the music. He goes home, tells his parents, that beautiful pair of tefillin that you just bought for me a couple of weeks ago, it's lost. And, can't find it, so they weren't pleased. They went and they tried to again, find any way that they could, call lost and found, called Gemas, call the police, from store to store, door to door. They were not able to find it. They looked for a long time. They were not able to find it, and they were very upset. The father went to a sefer macher, to a tefillin macher, and got one of the loaner pairs of tefillin for his son in the meantime. But they were very hopeful that someday soon they would be able to find the tefillin again. What happened was, where did those tefillin go? The tefillin were on a curb, and a Russian lady, a Jewish lady that she wasn't from, she was a Russian immigrant, an older woman. She had her little shopping cart in Brooklyn, and she was walking down the street. She sees a nice velvet bag. She didn't really know what it was, and she put it in her shopping cart, and then later as she went home, she takes it out, and she looks that there was tefillin. She vaguely understood this is a Jewish item, it's a religious item. She mamish knew from nothing, but she had a 10-year-old grandson, and who went to a yeshiva, a Russian boy who went to a Russian yeshiva in Brooklyn, and she said, maybe he'll be able to help me get this back to the right owner. So it didn't say Meir Simcha Breuer on the tefillin, it just said Meir Simcha. So that made it all the more difficult to track down who it was. But the grandson brought the pair of tefillin to his Rabbi in this yeshiva that he went to, and he gave it to his Rabbi, told the Rabbi, my grandmother found this pair of tefillin, maybe you could find the proper owner. And the Rabbi says, yes, I'm going to try to do whatever I can, somebody's probably desperately looking for it. And the Rabbi put it in one of the drawers of his desk, and as could be expected sometimes, even Rabbeim could sometimes be absent-minded, and he forgot about it. Forgot all about the tefillin in 1 week. 2 weeks goes by, nothing's happening. Tefillin are just sitting there collecting dust in the drawer. A few weeks later, this Rabbi is giving a shiur to his Russian Talmidim about tefillin, and he's describing what they are and the sight of tefillin and what they look like. And these boys, remember, they came from non-religious homes. Their grandparents haven't seen tefillin for 70 years. So they were intrigued. They wanted to see, and he's like kicking himself, why didn't I bring my own pair from home? It would have made the lesson so much clearer for these boys. And all of a sudden it triggered in his mind that, wait a minute, I have a pair of tefillin in my drawer. And he opens up the drawer. Sure enough, the Meir Simcha's tefillin are there, and he carefully takes them out, and he shows the boys what a tefillin shel yad looks like, what a tefillin shel rosh looks like. And the boys were mesmerized. They were so enthralled. Wow, the shiny ritzuos and the beautiful tefillin and the batim and they wanted to touch it themselves. He says, no, you can't really touch it because it's not ours and we have to be very careful with it. But then he remembered, I have to get these tefillin back to somebody. So as he was looking through the tefillin, he saw that the Sefer who checked the tefillin lived in Brooklyn. He says, his number was there. So he calls up the Sefer. He has a lead now. Calls up the Sefer, and he says to the Sefer, I have a pair of tefillin that I found by, all it says in the bag is Meir Simcha. Maybe you know who this is. So he said, of course I know who it is, because Rabbi Breuer himself came into my store to find out if he could borrow a pair of loaner tefillin. He was so upset his son lost the tefillin. You don't know how happy Rabbi Breuer is going to be, and his wife and his son. It's going to be a tremendous simcha. You did a big mitzvah by returning this lost pair of tefillin. So Rabbi Geller, the name of the Rebbe, calls Rabbi Breuer. The Sefer gave him Rabbi Breuer's number, and he says, my name is Rabbi Geller, and I have the pair of your son's tefillin that he lost. He says, wow, I can't believe it. He was so excited, Rabbi Breuer. He says, don't go anywhere. I'm going to come to your house right now and pick it up. He says, no, I'm coming on the way anyway. I'm going to pass by the Rav's house. I'll be there in a few minutes. So he comes in, and they couldn't thank him enough. They didn't believe that they'd ever see this pair of tefillin again. And the husband and the wife, and they wanted to give him money as a reward. He says, no, it's the mitzvah of Shabbat Saveda, and I'm happy to be able to do it. I'm sorry it took this long. So the mother says, I want to do something nice for you. I mean, you're not going to take money, but you did such a favor for us. Let us do something nice for you. She said, I have a great idea. My husband is a very big Rav, and he's a great speaker. Everybody is asking him to speak all over the country, all over the world. She says, how about if my husband comes into your classroom, and he'll give a little talk to your Talmidim about tefillin. So the Rebbe said, that's a fantastic idea. I would love that. And so they made a date that Rabbi Breuer would come to the class and teach these Russian boys a thing or two about tefillin. So Rabbi Breuer comes to the class, and he looks very aristocratic. He looks very, very chashuv. He has just his whole levush, his whole demeanor is very, very chashuv, and the boys are very impressed. And he has an accent to boot, which always never hurts. And he says that, about tefillin and the site of tefillin. He says that you see from this story, that you boys helped me out finding this pair of tefillin of my son. You see that the Rabbeinu Shalom always makes sure to return things that are lost to the right owner. Whatever is lost, the Rabbeinu Shalom somehow, some way finds a way to get it back to you. And when he said that, one boy in the back of the class raises his hand and says, can I ask the Rav a question? He says, yes. He says, what about if a person loses his neshama? If a person loses his neshama, will the Rabbeinu Shalom make sure to return that as well to you? And of course, what the boy meant is that he had so many friends and relatives whose neshamas were no longer there. They're completely unaffiliated with Yiddishkeit, with the Rabbeinu Shalom. Will the Rabbeinu Shalom return their neshamas as well? And Rabbi Breuer was very, very moved by this question. And he says, of course, the Rabbeinu Shalom will even return a person's neshama. Everything. The Rabbeinu Shalom returns tefillin, the Rabbeinu Shalom returns the neshama. Whatever is lost, the Rabbeinu Shalom somehow, some way makes sure that it gets back to the balabas. Rabbi Breuer later that day got a lift with another Rav in Flatbush, and he was telling over this amazing story from beginning to end, and he included this question that this Russian boy had asked him that touched him so. And this other Rav says, it's a beautiful story. I'd like to say it over tonight. There's a vart of a chassan, and the chassan was a boy that went off the derech, and he's come back to the derech, and he's getting married soon. His vart is tonight, and I'd like to say over this beautiful story because it so illustrates what this boy went through. He had a neshama. His neshama got lost. The Rabbeinu Shalom somehow was able to allow him to find his neshama again, and now he has a simcha. So he said it over this night with the rishus of the chassan. He told the chassan beforehand, of course, that he was going to say such a thing, and he said, and everybody in the room was crying, because this is mamish the story of this chassan's life. And then after that, the chassan got up and said a story of his own. He said, I want you to know how amazing the mashal is to the nimshal. Because what happened was that I went off the derech, as everybody here knows. And you know how I got back on the derech? He says, what happened was I was a 15-year-old boy. I had no interest in Yiddishkeit. I had no interest in the Rabbi Shalom. I wanted to find my own way. I went completely off the derech. I went to Eretz Yisrael, and I completely lost shaykhs to anything in terms of Torah and Yiddishkeit. But one thing I always held on to my tefillin. My tefillin was something that I always took with me wherever I traveled with them. Wherever I would go, I would take my tefillin with me. For whatever reason, that was something that I had with me. And I always held on to. I didn't put them on necessarily every day, but I always made sure to have them with me. And one day I went to a beach with my friends in Tel Aviv, and I brought my tefillin with me, and we were in a rush, we had to catch the bus, and on the bus, all of a sudden I chapped, I forgot my tefillin on the beach. And it was too late to go back, the bus was already on its way to Yerushalayim, and I was very, very upset with myself, how could I forget it? But then, I forgot about them, and life went on, and I was able to continue my life as a bacher without my tefillin, and I went on my own free way, and I didn't have my tefillin. And a year or two later, I went into a Sfarim store with a friend of mine who wanted to buy, some present to bring back home, and I took him to Mea Sharim, and we walked into the Sfarim store, and I was looking around on the shelves at all the tchotchkes, the souvenirs, the Sfarim, and all of a sudden something popped out at me, and it was my tefillin. The tefillin that I had lost 2 years ago on the beach in Tel Aviv, somehow, some way, made it back to a store shelf in Mea Sharim in Yerushalayim. And I couldn't believe it. I started crying. I told the store owner, these are my tefillin. And I gave a simon for it, and he gave it back to me. And because of that, I completely turned my life around, and I became from again. If the Rabbi Shalom is able to allow me to rediscover my tefillin, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also telling me that I could rediscover my neshama. And so I changed my whole life, and I went and I became from again, and I found an amazing Beis Yaakov girl. I just got engaged to, and everyone's here at the Vart. And Baruch Hashem, this is my story. It's mamish ad lahafli. What the Rav just said, the story about the Russian boy who was saying that the tefillin are like his neshama, that he wants to also know that the Rebbeinu Shalom will return the neshama just like the tefillin. That's mamish what happened to me. I lost my tefillin, the Rebbeinu Shalom allowed me to find my tefillin, and that showed me that if I could find my tefillin, I could find my neshama as well. And there's one extra knetch to the story, that on the morning of his chasna, this was by the Vart, on the morning of his chasna, he went with his father to a shtibel in Flatbush, and there was an old blind man that was collecting money inside the shtibel, and the boy said to his father, that man looks a little familiar. And the father looks carefully and says, yeah, you know who that was? That was the Sefer, that's the Sefer who wrote your tefillin. And they went over to the Sefer who wrote the tefillin, and they gave him a very big check, and they told him the whole story, and how his tefillin were the GPS system that enabled his son to come back to the derech, and that his son is getting married tonight, Kedas Moshe Yisrael, to a Bas Yisrael, and he'd very much like if the Sefer himself would come and dance at the chasna with them. This is what tefillin are. Tefillin are our guide in life. We are lost. We are mamish lost. We are driving in the dark throughout life. We have no way of knowing whether we're going in the right direction or the wrong direction, because we are so inundated by Olam Hazeh, and we are chamris ourselves. So the Rabbi Shalom put a neshama in us. But the neshama is also, it lacks a guidance. It can't. It's so bombarded by Olam Hazeh that even it finds itself lost. So the Rabbi Shalom gave us tefillin. And the tefillin give us the yesaides in life. They are giving us instruction, daily instructions. As the GPS tells us which way to go, make a right, make a left, or by me redirecting, constantly, I always mess up. I'm horrible with the GPS. It's easier for me not to have a GPS. It just takes so much quicker to get there. But that's what the Tefillin are. The Tefillin are the Yesodis. The Tefillin are giving us the directional tracking system that we need to make it back home to the Rabbi Shalom.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org